salary in the company and you lose, your own soul? What's it going to do if you receive the applause of the world and yet you lose your own soul? And so much of what we worry about and concern ourselves with doesn't really matter in the end, does it? There's I forgot what publication it was now, and it came out about half a dozen years ago, about what would you do if somebody just gave you $1 million? What would you do? And what they did was they asked 6 financial advisors, what should a person do if they received $1 million just out of nowhere? Maybe it was an inheritance, or maybe it was a lottery. Don't play the lottery. That's not I'm not telling you to play the lottery. Don't play the lottery, okay? But if you were just to get $1 million out of nowhere, what would you do? And here's what those financial advisors said. They said, but you know what they didn't say? Nobody ever said, and you ought to give some of it to somebody else. Not a one of them said that. You ought to go find somebody hungry and feed them, and somebody who doesn't have a job and employ them, or somebody who is destitute and help them get back on their feet again. Not a one of them said that. And then we go to the parable today in Luke chapter 12. Go ahead and turn over there. Because at this point, it becomes even more powerful once you start to dwell on what we are and what God wants us to be. And then you read Luke chapter 12. Listen to what it says. And then one from the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Apparently he doesn't want to. So he's going to make Jesus, force him. But instead he said unto him, Man, who made me a judge or an arbiter over you? Take heed and beware of covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things that he possesses. And then he spoke a parable to them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentiful. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do with that $1 million that somebody just gave me? What shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? And by the way, that's where wealth was put back then. It was put in precious metal, but it was often put in grain too. Kind of like Bitcoin, except you can't eat Bitcoin. But you can store value in things, all right? They stored value in grain. So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, So you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, Fool, this not your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasures for himself and is not rich towards God. Jesus says it's either the way of the world or it's the way of the cross. It's either you're going to invest in the flesh or you're going to invest in the Spirit. What's the best deal that you could make? Which is kind of what we're concerned about anyway, right? We're always concerned with what's the best deal I can make? Go to a pawn shop. You want to pawn it or sell it? I want to sell it. What's the best deal I can get from you? Well, I can give you this. No, can you give me that? Well, I can come up to that. Well, can you come up to this? I want the best deal I can make. When you make an offer on a house, what are you going to do? Well, there was a time a couple of years ago where you just gave full price. But if the markets were healthy, you'd come under that and say, I want to get the best deal that I can make. You go to a car lot. What's the best deal, that I can make? We don't do that with the Christian life, do we? What's the best deal that I can make as a child of God? Is it investing in something that I can see and touch and use and have and spend? Or is it something intangible? Or is it something real? Is it something just for the moment? Or is it something eternal? Which again leads us back to the question, who owns you? Who owns you? And as long as you think that you own your own life, you'll be stingy. You'll think that it all depends on you, that God has nothing to do with it. You are on your own. But when you discover that God owns everything, including you, then your attitude towards money and your attitude towards wealth and your giving will not be an issue in your life. You'll finally have it right. Hey, here's one of the things I want to say, okay? Hey, let me be Greg for a moment, okay? Just let me be Greg. Don't, and just, no offense intended, but just let me be Greg, okay? It all has to do with what your definition of success really truly is. Okay, look, in my time preaching, which was almost 30 years, I was associated with a lot of Christian high schools. And every one of those Christian high schools, you know, their most important honor that you can give somebody at a Christian high school as a student is what? Mr. and Mrs. Christian School, insert name there, right? That's the most important thing that you can do. Or the most likely to succeed. That's probably pretty close to Mr. and Mrs. Christian, whatever. I cannot begin to tell you how many times that the Mr. Christian turned out to be a homosexual. More often than, it's alarming how often that was true. And just as alarming is the Mr. and Mrs. Christian School who grew up to have absolutely nothing to do with the Lord's church. Nothing. When I went to school, ours was, not only was the winner homosexual, the runner-up was too. And I think it's because kids' definition of success. They all grew up to make a lot of money. They were very successful in whatever, career, that they had. Just, they're not faithful children of God. I told somebody the other day, Robert and Alice, I told somebody the other day that, you should have elected me most likely to succeed in Mr. Morris Hill. Or you should have elected Boyce Holderfield, Mr. Can you imagine that if we were elected Mr. Morris Hill or most likely to succeed, me or Boyce? That was not going to happen. And yet, if you go through our class, you would not believe how many in our class are no longer faithful members of the Lord's church. And the only thing really I wanted to do in high school was I just wanted to find a wife that loved me and kids that adored me and become a faithful Christian. I was not at the time. I mean, that's the reason why I wasn't elected Mr. Morris Hill, or most likely to see, because I wasn't. But I wanted to grow up eventually and become a faithful child of God. And I did all those things. And there were other people in my class that did all those things too. And you know what? That right there, that's the definition of success.